Everyone on the USS Leviathan thought she was just the cook. Petty Officer Storm Blackwater spent her days in the galley, preparing meals for the crew while the submarine patrolled the depths of the Pacific. But when enemy submarines surrounded them in the deepest waters of the Mariana Trench, and the captain lay unconscious from a catastrophic decompression, Storm's voice came over the intercom with orders that no cook should have known how to give. What the crew discovered about their quiet galley worker would change everything they thought they knew about submarine warfare, and about the woman who had been hiding in plain sight. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from today. And if you believe stories of hidden heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. You make this community what it is. The USS Leviathan was one of the most advanced attack submarines in the United States Navy, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine capable of operations in the deepest and most hostile waters on Earth. With a crew of 134 sailors, the Leviathan conducted classified missions that officially never happened, patrolling the ocean depths where American submarines maintained the delicate balance of underwater warfare that kept global conflicts from escalating beyond diplomatic tensions. Deep in the submarine's galley, surrounded by the constant hum of air recycling systems and the subtle creaks and groans that marked life hundreds of feet below the ocean's surface, Petty Officer Third Class Storm Blackwater prepared meals for her fellow sailors with the same methodical precision she had maintained for the past 18 months. To the crew of the Leviathan, Storm was simply the cook, a quiet woman in her late 20s who kept to herself, performed her duties competently, and seemed to prefer the isolation of the galley to the social interactions that defined submarine life for most sailors. She had joined the crew through what appeared to be a routine personnel transfer, filling a vacant position in the food service division with qualifications that were adequate but unremarkable. What distinguished Storm from other food service personnel wasn't her culinary skills, though her meals were consistently better than what most submarine crews experienced. What made her different was her almost uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure, her apparent indifference to the claustrophobic conditions that affected some sailors, and her habit of working during off-duty hours when most of the crew was sleeping. But perhaps most notably, Storm had a tendency to be present during critical operations, always finding reasons to be in corridors or compartments where she could observe the submarine's tactical operations without attracting attention. The crew attributed this to curiosity or boredom, never suspecting that their cook was conducting systematic observation and analysis of Leviathan's capabilities, crew performance, and operational procedures. Commander David Kane, the submarine's commanding officer, had noticed Storm's presence during sensitive operations, but had never considered it significant enough to investigate. Kane was a career submarine officer with over 20 years of experience in underwater warfare, and he had developed the kind of tactical instincts that came from commanding submarines in some of the most dangerous waters in the world. But Kane had never commanded a submarine that carried a crew member whose actual qualifications were classified at levels he didn't have access to, and whose real mission aboard the Leviathan was known only to a handful of senior officials in the Pentagon and the intelligence community. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning, 400 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, as the Leviathan conducted a routine patrol in waters that were anything but routine. The submarine was operating near the edge of the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the Earth's oceans, where the seafloor dropped away into abyssal depths that have been explored by only a handful of human beings. The Leviathan's mission in these waters was officially described as oceanographic research support, but the crew understood that they were actually conducting surveillance operations designed to monitor submarine activities by foreign navies. The waters near the Mariana Trench were strategic because they provided access routes for submarines traveling between different ocean basins while remaining hidden from most detection systems. Storm was in the galley, preparing the midday meal, when the first indication of trouble came through the submarine's passive sonar systems. The contact was subtle, just a slight change in the ambient noise levels that suggested the presence of another submarine in the area. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, the Leviathan's executive officer, was in a control room when the sonar operator reported the contact. "Con, sonar," came the voice of sonar technician First Class Rodriguez over the intercom. "I'm holding a possible submarine contact, bearing 085, range approximately 12,000 yards. Commander Kane moved to the sonar display, studying the acoustic signature that Rodriguez had detected. Classification? Kane asked. Sir, the contact is running quiet, but the signature suggests a nuclear submarine. Possibly foreign, possibly one of ours conducting operations in the area. Kane studied the sonar display, noting the characteristics of the contact that Rodriguez had identified. Rodriguez, how confident are you in the classification? Sir, approximately 70% confident it's a submarine, but the acoustic signature doesn't match any known American submarines operating in this area. Kane felt his stomach tighten. Foreign submarines in these waters were not necessarily hostile, but they represented potential threats that required careful monitoring and strategic response. Martinez, bring the boat to battle stations quietly. I don't want to alert the contact that we detected them. As the crew of the Leviathan quietly moved to their battle stations, Storm continued working in the galley, but her attention was now focused on the sounds and vibrations that indicated the submarine's change in operational status. Through years of experience that the crew knew nothing about, she could interpret the subtle changes in the submarine's acoustic signature that indicated tactical maneuvering. What concerned Storm wasn't the presence of a single foreign submarine. It was a pattern of acoustic anomalies she had been detecting for the past several hours that suggested multiple contacts operating in coordinated formations. 20 minutes after the first contact was detected, Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom with a report that made everyone in the control room freeze. Con, sonar. I'm now holding multiple contacts. Count 4, possibly 5 submarine contacts at various bearings and ranges. Kane stared at the sonar display, hardly believing what he was seeing. 5 foreign submarines operating in the same area represented either an extraordinary coincidence or a coordinated operation that posed a significant threat to the Leviathan. Rodriguez, classification on the additional contacts. Sir, all contact appear to be nuclear submarines. Acoustic signatures suggest a mix of attack submarines and possibly one ballistic missile submarine. Kane was facing a tactical situation that went far beyond routine patrol operations. Multiple foreign submarines operating in coordinated formations suggested either a major training exercise or the preliminary stages of an operation that could have strategic implications. Martinez, get me a priority communication with Pacific Fleet Command. We need to report this contact information immediately. But as Martinez began establishing the communication link, Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom with a report that changed everything. Con, sonar. All contacts are maneuvering to surround our position. Recommend immediate evasive action. Kane felt his blood run cold. The foreign submarines weren't just operating in the area. They were actively maneuvering to trap the Leviathan in a position where escape will be difficult or impossible. All ahead, full, Kane ordered. Emergency dive. Take us down to 800 feet. The Leviathan's nuclear reactor increased power output, driving the submarine deeper into the ocean, while simultaneously accelerating toward what Kane hoped would be an escape route to the foreign submarine formation. But as the submarine descended through the thermoclines that provided natural concealment from sonar detection, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Sir, Rodriguez reported, contact are maintaining intercept courses. They appear to have anticipated our evasive maneuvers. Kane studied the tactical display, recognizing that the foreign submarines had positioned themselves with the kind of precision that suggested they had been tracking Leviathan for some time before revealing their presence. Martinez, how long until we reach the communication depth for the priority message? Sir, at current depth and with the interference in the thermal layers, we won't be able to establish reliable communication for at least 30 minutes. Kane was facing the nightmare scenario that every submarine commander trained for but hoped never to encounter, being surrounded by hostile submarines in deep water with limited options for escape or communication with higher authority. Rodriguez, any change in contact behavior? Sir, contact appear to be maintaining patrol patterns around our position. They're not closing for attack, but they're not allowing us any clear escape routes. Kane was beginning to understand that the foreign submarines weren't necessarily planning to attack the Leviathan. They were demonstrating their ability to detect and track American submarines in waters that were supposed to provide strategic concealment. But the demonstration was about to become something much more dangerous. At 1,347 hours, while the Leviathan maneuvered through the deep waters of the Mariana Trench, trying to avoid detection by the surrounding foreign submarines, a catastrophic equipment failure in the submarine's primary ballast control system caused a sudden uncontrolled descent that nearly resulted in the loss of the entire crew. The failure began as a minor malfunction in one of the ballast tank sensors, but cascaded through interconnected systems until the submarine was descending rapidly toward depths that exceeded its design operating limits. The Leviathan dropped from 800 feet to over 1,200 feet in less than 3 minutes, with the crew struggling to regain control while depth charges of increasing pressure threatened to crush the submarine's hull. Commander Kane was in control room attempting to coordinate emergency procedures when the rapid decompression from the ballast system failure caused him to lose consciousness. Lieutenant Commander Martinez was thrown against the bulkhead by the violent motion of the submarine and suffered a head injury that left her temporarily unable to coordinate the emergency response. For crucial minutes, the USS Leviathan descended through the ocean depths without effective command authority, while foreign submarines monitored the crisis, and the crew struggled to implement emergency procedures that required coordination and leadership that was temporarily unavailable. It was in this moment of crisis, with the submarine's survival depending on immediate and decisive action, that Storm Blackwater made a decision that would reveal her true identity and change the entire tactical situation. Moving from the galley to the control room with the kind of confident navigation that suggested intimate familiarity with the submarine's layout, Storm took command of the emergency response with authority that stunned the crew. "Emergency blow all ballast tanks," she ordered, her voice carrying over the submarine's intercom with the kind of calm precision that indicated extensive experience with submarine emergency procedures. "All stop on the main engines. Prepare to surface if we can't arrest the descent at 1,400 feet. The crew responded to her orders without hesitation, their training overriding their confusion about why the cook was giving commands that should have come from the commanding officer or executive officer. But Storm's knowledge of submarine operations went far beyond what any food service personnel should have possessed. As she coordinated the emergency response, she demonstrated familiarity with ballast control systems, depth management procedures, and emergency surfacing techniques that indicated advanced training in submarine operations. "Rodriguez," Storm called to the sonar operator, "report on contact behavior during our emergency maneuvers." "Ma'am," Rodriguez replied, his voice reflecting both professionalism and confusion. "Contact appear to be maintaining their positions. No indication of hostile intent during our emergency." Storm processed this information with the kind of tactical thinking that suggested she understood the strategic implications of the foreign submarine's behavior during the Leviathan's crisis. "Chief Williams," she called to the senior enlisted man in the control room, "how long until the captain regains consciousness?" "Ma'am, the corpsman estimates at least 20 minutes before the captain is able to resume command." Storm looked around the control room, where the crew was watching her with expressions that reflected both relief at having someone take charge of the emergency and confusion about her apparent qualifications to do so. "Chief Williams, I'm assuming temporary command of this vessel until the captain or executive officer is able to resume their duties." Chief Petty Officer Williams, a career submariner with over 15 years of experience, stared at Storm for a moment before responding. "Ma'am, with respect, you're not in the chain of command for this vessel." Storm looked directly at Williams, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an authority that hadn't been there during her 18 months as the submarine's cook. "Chief, I'm qualified to command this vessel under emergency protocols that supersede standard chain of command procedures." Williams continued to stare at Storm, clearly trying to reconcile the woman he had known as a quiet cook with the officer who was now demonstrating command authority and technical knowledge that went far beyond her supposed qualifications. "Ma'am, what are your actual qualifications?" Storm was quiet for a moment, clearly debating how much to reveal to a crew that had known her only as food service personnel. "Chief, I'm a graduate of the Naval Submarine School, qualified in submarines, and certified for command of nuclear submarines under emergency conditions." The control room fell silent as the crew processed what Storm had just revealed. The qualifications she was claiming represented years of specialized training that was among the most demanding in the military. "Ma'am," Williams said carefully. If that's true, what have you been doing assigned to food service? Storm was coordinating the submarine's emergency ascent while simultaneously monitoring the tactical situation with the foreign submarines. But she took a moment to address Williams' question. Chief, I was assigned to this vessel undercover to conduct classified observation and assessment of submarine operations in this region. Williams felt his understanding of the past 18 months shift dramatically. Ma'am, you're telling us that you've been operating undercover for a year and a half? Chief, that's exactly what I'm telling you. As Storm continued to coordinate the emergency response, Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom with a report that added new complexity to the tactical situation. Control, sonar, the foreign contacts are beginning to close on our position. It appears they may be offering assistance with our emergency. Storm processed this information with a kind of tactical analysis that indicated she understood the implications of foreign submarines offering aid to an American vessel in distress. Rodriguez, what's the closest contact range and bearing? Ma'am, closest contact is now at 3,000 yards, bearing 045, and appears to be maneuvering to intercept our ascent path. Storm was facing a decision that went beyond submarine operations to questions of international relations and strategic policy. Accepting assistance from foreign submarines could provide crucial help in resolving the Leviathan's emergency, but would also reveal American submarine capabilities and positions to potential adversaries. Chief Williams, what's the status of our emergency ascent? Ma'am, we've arrested the descent at 1,350 feet and are beginning controlled ascent. But the ballast control system is still malfunctioning, and we may not be able to maintain depth control without external assistance. Storm studied the tactical display, weighing the risks of accepting foreign assistance against the possibility of losing the submarine if the emergency couldn't be resolved with internal resources. Rodriguez, can you establish communication with the closest foreign contact? Ma'am, we can try. But any communication will reveal our position and capabilities to all contact in the area. Storm was quiet for a moment, making calculations that involved not just the immediate tactical situation, but the broader strategic implications of her decisions. Rodriguez, establish communication on international emergency frequencies. Let's see what kind of assistance they're offering. The communication that followed would prove to be one of the most unusual exchanges in the history of submarine warfare. An American submarine in distress communicating with foreign submarines that had been tracking them, now offering assistance in resolving an emergency that could result in the loss of life. American submarine, this is Captain Volkov of the Russian Navy, came the voice over the emergency communication channel. We have been monitoring your situation and are prepared to offer assistance if needed. Storm keyed the microphone, speaking with a kind of diplomatic precision that indicated training in international maritime law and submarine protocols. Captain Volkov, this is the USS Leviathan. We appreciate your offer of assistance. We are currently experiencing ballast control difficulties that may require external support to resolve safely. USS Leviathan, we can provide technical assistance or escort support to help you reach safe waters. Our submarines are equipped with emergency ballast systems that can be transferred if necessary. Storm was processing the tactical implications of the Russian offer while simultaneously coordinating the Leviathan's emergency procedures. Captain Volkov, what would you require in exchange for technical assistance? USS Leviathan, we require only that this incident be reported to both our governments as an example of cooperation between naval forces during maritime emergencies. Storm understood that Captain Volkov was offering a face-saving solution that would allow both sides to resolve the immediate crisis, while avoiding the escalation that could result from a confrontation between submarine forces. Captain Volkov, we accept your offer of technical assistance. What followed was a complex operation that involved Russian submarines providing ballast control equipment to Leviathan, while American sailors worked alongside Russian technicians to resolve the emergency that had threatened the submarine's survival. But as the emergency was resolved and the Leviathan regained full operational capability, Storm found herself facing questions from her own crew that went to the heart of her cover assignment and actual qualifications. Ma'am, Chief Williams said as the submarine returned to normal operations, I think the crew deserves to understand who you really are and what you've actually been doing aboard this vessel. Storm looked around the control room, where sailors who had known her as a cook were now watching with expressions that reflected both respect for her handling of the emergency and confusion about her actual identity. "Chief, what I can tell you is that I'm Lieutenant Commander Storm Blackwater, United States Navy. I'm qualified for command of nuclear submarines, and I've been assigned to this vessel to conduct classified assessment of submarine operations and crew performance." The revelation that their cook was actually a lieutenant commander sent shockwaves through the crew. In the rigid hierarchy of submarine operations, officers with command qualifications didn't serve in enlisted positions unless there were extraordinary circumstances. "Ma'am," Rodriguez asked, "if you're qualified for submarine command, why were you assigned as food service personnel?" Storm was quiet for a moment, clearly debating how much classified information she could reveal to the crew. "Rodriguez, there are assessment and evaluation missions that require personnel to observe submarine operations from positions that don't attract attention or influence normal crew behavior." Chief Williams was beginning to understand the implications of what Storm was revealing. "Ma'am, you've been evaluating our performance for 18 months without us knowing about it." "Chief, I've been assessing submarine operations, crew capabilities, and tactical procedures under actual operational conditions. That assessment has been used to improve submarine training and operational doctrine." Rodriguez looked up from his sonar display. "Ma'am, does that mean you've been reporting on our performance to higher command?" "Rodriguez, I've been providing analysis and recommendations that are used to enhance submarine operational effectiveness. Your individual performance evaluations haven't been affected by my observations." But Commander Kane, who had regained consciousness during the final stages of the emergency response, was now alert enough to participate in the conversation about Storm's actual identity and mission. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwater," Kane said, his voice still weak but carrying the authority of command, "I need to understand the scope of your assignment aboard my submarine." Storm came to attention as Kane resumed command of the vessel. "Sir, I was assigned to conduct comprehensive assessment of submarine operations in strategic waters, with particular focus on crew performance under high-stress conditions and tactical effectiveness against potential adversaries." Kane studied Storm's expression, recognizing professional competence she had demonstrated during the emergency, but still processing the implications of having an undercover officer aboard a submarine. "Lieutenant Commander, what can you tell me about the classification of your assignment?" "Sir, my assignment is classified at levels that require special access clearances. I'm authorized to reveal my actual identity and mission only under circumstances where operational security considerations are outweighed by immediate tactical requirements." Kane was beginning to understand that Storm's decision to reveal her identity during the emergency had been a calculated risk based on the severity of the situation. "Lieutenant Commander, the tactical situation with the Russian submarines, how does that relate to your assessment mission?" Storm gestured toward the tactical display, where the Russian submarines were still visible but now maintaining distances that indicated they were withdrawing from the immediate area. "Sir, the interaction with foreign submarines during our emergency provides valuable intelligence about their capabilities, intentions, and tactical procedures. This intelligence contributes to broader assessments of submarine warfare capabilities in strategic waters." Kane was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of what Storm was telling him. "Lieutenant Commander, are you saying that the emergency we just experienced was actually an intelligence-gathering opportunity?" "Sir, every interaction with foreign military forces provides intelligence that can be used to enhance American strategic capabilities. But my primary concern during the emergency was the safety of this crew and the security of this vessel." Kane nodded, recognizing that Storm had successfully balanced multiple competing priorities during a crisis that could have resulted in the loss of the submarine and crew. "Lieutenant Commander, what happens now? Do you resume your cover assignment, or has your identity been compromised beyond the point where covert operations are possible?" Storm looked around the control room, where the crew was still processing the revelation that their cook had actually been a lieutenant commander conducting classified assessment operations. "Sir, that decision will be made by higher authority based on the operational value of continuing covert assessment versus the intelligence gathered during this incident." Kane was beginning to appreciate the complexity of the decisions that would need to be made about Storm's future assignment and the broader implications of her revealed identity. Lieutenant Commander, the crew performance during this emergency, how does that factor into your assessment? Storm was quiet for a moment, clearly considering how to respond to a question that went to the heart of her evaluation mission. Sir, the crew of this vessel performed exceptionally under extreme stress. Their response to emergency procedures was textbook perfect, and their adaptation to unusual command circumstances demonstrated flexibility and professionalism that exceeds standard expectations. Chief Williams looked up from his station. Ma'am, does that mean we pass your evaluation? Storm smiled for the first time since revealing her identity. Chief, you didn't just pass. You demonstrated submarine operational capabilities that will be used as the standard for training and evaluation throughout the submarine force. But Kane had additional questions about the broader implications of Storm's assignment and the intelligence she had gathered during her time aboard the Leviathan. Lieutenant Commander, the assessment you've been conducting, what are the strategic implications of your findings? Storm looked at Kane carefully, clearly evaluating how much classified information she could discuss with the submarine's commanding officer. Sir, that analysis involves strategic assessments that are classified above your current clearance level. What I can tell you is that the performance of this crew and the capabilities of this vessel contribute to broader evaluations of American submarine warfare effectiveness. Kane was quiet for a moment, then asked a question that had been bothering him since Storm revealed her identity. Lieutenant Commander, how many other submarines have officers conducting similar assessment missions? Sir, that information is classified, but I can tell you that comprehensive assessment of submarine operations is an ongoing priority for naval leadership. Kane was beginning to understand that Storm's assignment represented part of a larger program designed to evaluate and improve submarine warfare capabilities across the entire fleet. Lieutenant Commander, the interaction with Russian submarines during our emergency, will that intelligence be used to modify American submarine tactics and procedures? Sir, all intelligence gathered during submarine operations is analyzed and used to enhance American strategic capabilities. The information from this incident will contribute to broader assessments of foreign submarine capabilities and intentions. Kane nodded, recognizing that the emergency they had just experienced would have strategic implications that went far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Lieutenant Commander, what recommendations will you make based on your 18 months of observation aboard this vessel? Storm was quiet for a moment, clearly considering how to summarize 18 months of detailed analysis and assessment. Sir, I will recommend that the crew and operational procedures of this vessel be used as the model for submarine operations in strategic waters. The performance standards and tactical capabilities demonstrated by this crew represent the highest levels of submarine warfare effectiveness. Chief Williams looked up from his station. Ma'am, what about the emergency we just experienced? How does that factor into your recommendations? Chief, the crew response to this emergency demonstrated adaptive capabilities and crisis management skills that exceed what standard training can achieve. Those capabilities will be analyzed and incorporated into enhanced training programs for submarine personnel. But Rodriguez had a question that went to the heart of Storm's covert mission and its broader implications. Ma'am, the foreign submarines that surrounded us, was that part of planned exercise? Or were we actually in danger? Storm looked at Rodriguez carefully before responding. Rodriguez, the foreign submarines were conducting legitimate operations in international waters. The tactical situation that developed was not planned, but it provided valuable intelligence about foreign submarine capabilities and response procedures. Kane was beginning to understand that the entire incident, from the initial detection of foreign submarines through the emergency and subsequent cooperation, had provided intelligence opportunities that might not have been available under normal operational circumstances. Lieutenant Commander, will your assessment include recommendations about how to respond to similar tactical situations in the future? Sir, my assessment will include comprehensive analysis of submarine operations under stress conditions, crew performance during emergencies, and tactical procedures for interaction with foreign naval forces. Those recommendations will be used to enhance submarine operational doctrine. Kane was quiet for a moment, then asked a question that he suspected would determine Storm's future assignment. Lieutenant Commander, Now that your identity has been revealed to the crew, can you continue your assessment mission aboard this vessel? Storm looked around the control room, where sailors who had known her as a cook were now aware that she was actually Lieutenant Commander conducting classified evaluation of their performance. Sir, that decision will be made by higher authority. But my assessment of this crew and this vessel is essentially complete. The intelligence gathered during this incident represents the culmination of 18 months of observation and analysis. Kane nodded, understanding that Storm's mission aboard the Leviathan was probably ending, but that her work would have implications for submarine operations throughout the fleet. 2 weeks later, the USS Leviathan returned to port at Naval Base Pearl Harbor, where Lieutenant Commander Storm Blackwater was transferred to a classified assignment that officially didn't exist. The crew of the Leviathan learned that their former cook had been promoted to full commander and assigned to develop new training programs for submarine officers based on the assessment she conducted during her undercover assignment. But what they didn't learn was the full scope of Storm's actual background and the strategic implications of the intelligence she had gathered during her time aboard their submarine. Commander Storm Blackwater was not just a submarine officer conducting assessment missions. She was a graduate of the Naval War College with advanced degrees in strategic studies and international relations. Her assignment to Leviathan had been part of a comprehensive program designed to evaluate American submarine capabilities from the perspective of potential adversaries. The 18 months she had spent observing submarine operations had provided intelligence that was being used to redesign submarine training, modify tactical procedures, and enhance the strategic effectiveness of the entire submarine force. But perhaps most importantly, her successful management of the emergency situation and the diplomatic resolution of the tactical crisis with Russian submarines had demonstrated capabilities that led to her assignment to even more sensitive and classified missions. 6 months after leaving the Leviathan, Commander Blackwater was in command of her own submarine, conducting operations in waters that were even more strategic and dangerous than the Mariana Trench. The USS Phantom, a specially modified attack submarine designed for the most sensitive intelligence-gathering missions, operated under her command in areas where the detection of American submarines could trigger international incidents. The crew of the Phantom knew from the beginning that their commanding officer was not a conventional submarine captain. Commander Blackwater's approach to submarine operations integrated intelligence gathering with tactical maneuvering in ways that pushed the boundaries of what submarine warfare could accomplish. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sarah Cross, the Phantom's executive officer, as they approached a sensitive operational area near disputed territorial waters, "the crew is curious about your background. They've heard stories about your previous assignment." Commander Blackwater was studying intelligence reports that detailed foreign submarine activities in the region where they were about to operate. "Lieutenant, what the crew needs to know is that our mission requires capabilities that go beyond conventional submarine operations. We're not just conducting patrols. We're gathering intelligence that affects strategic decision-making at the highest levels of government." Cross studied the tactical displays that showed multiple foreign submarines operating in patterns that suggested coordinated activities. "Captain, are we looking at another situation like the one you encountered aboard Leviathan?" "Lieutenant, what we're looking at is far more complex than what happened in the Mariana Trench. The foreign submarines in this area are conducting operations that could affect the strategic balance of naval power in this entire region." Commander Blackwater activated additional displays that showed intelligent analysis of foreign submarine capabilities and deployment patterns. "Lieutenant, our mission is to gather intelligence about these operations while remaining undetected. But if we're discovered, we need to be prepared to respond in ways that protect American strategic interests while avoiding escalation that could lead to broader conflicts." Cross was beginning to understand that their mission involved not just intelligence gathering, but potential diplomatic and tactical responses to situations that could have international implications. "Captain, what kind of responses are we prepared to make?" Commander Blackwater looked at Cross with an expression that reflected both the confidence that came from successful command experience and the caution that came from understanding the strategic implications of submarine operations. Lieutenant, we're prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect American interests and maintain the strategic balance that prevents conflicts from escalating beyond manageable levels. Cross was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of what Commander Blackwater was describing. Captain, the crew that served with you aboard the Leviathan, they described your command style as unlike anything they had experienced. What should our crew expect? Commander Blackwater smiled, remembering the sailors who had known her as a cook before discovering that she was actually a lieutenant commander with submarine command qualifications. Lieutenant, they should expect that we're going to conduct submarine operations that integrate intelligence gathering with tactical excellence in ways that achieve objectives most submarine commanders never even consider. Over the next 12 months, the USS Phantom conducted operations under Commander Blackwater's command that redefined what American submarines could accomplish in strategic waters. The intelligence gathered during these missions provided insights into foreign submarine capabilities that influence American naval strategy for years to come. But perhaps most importantly, Commander Blackwater's approach to submarine command, integrating covert observation with tactical excellence and diplomatic awareness, became the model for a new generation of submarine officers who understood that submarine warfare was as much about intelligence and strategy as it was about weapons and tactics. The quiet cook who had hidden her true identity aboard the USS Leviathan had become one of the most successful submarine commanders in the Navy, proving that the most effective military leaders are often those who understand their missions from perspectives that go far beyond conventional training and expectations. 5 years after her assignment aboard the USS Leviathan, Commander Storm Blackwater was promoted to captain and assigned to command the Naval Submarine School, where she developed training programs that incorporated the lessons she had learned during her years of covert assessment and submarine command. The training programs that Captain Blackwater developed were unlike anything that had existed in submarine education before. Instead of focusing purely on technical operations and tactical procedures, her curriculum integrated intelligence analysis, diplomatic awareness, and strategic thinking with conventional submarine warfare training. Submarine officers, Captain Blackwater would tell new classes of submarine trainees, are not just responsible for operating submarines. They're responsible for contributing to American strategic objectives in ways that require understanding far beyond what any technical manual can provide. Her students learn not just how to operate submarines, but how to think about submarine operations in the context of broader strategic objectives, international relations, and intelligence requirements that influence naval policy at the highest levels of government. But perhaps most importantly, Captain Blackwater taught her students that the most effective submarine officers were those who could observe and analyze situations from perspectives that went beyond their official roles and responsibilities. The lesson of my assignment aboard the USS Leviathan, Captain Blackwater would tell senior submarine officers, wasn't just that covert assessment could provide valuable intelligence. It was that submarine officers who understand their missions from multiple perspectives are more effective than those who focus only on their immediate operational responsibilities. Submarine warfare is not just about operating submarines. It's about understanding how submarine operations contribute to broader strategic objectives, and being prepared to adapt and respond when situations require capabilities that go beyond conventional training. The sailors who had served aboard the USS Leviathan during Storm's 18-month assessment mission often spoke of the experience as transformative, not just because they learned that their cook was actually a lieutenant commander, but because they learned that their own capabilities were far greater than they had realized. Chief Petty Officer Williams, who had served as a senior enlisted sailor during the emergency that revealed Storm's identity, was promoted to Master Chief and assigned to work with Captain Blackwater in developing new training programs. Captain Blackwater taught us that submarine operations are about more than just following procedures. Master Chief Williams would tell new submarine crews, They're about being prepared to respond to situations that no training manual can anticipate, and having the confidence to adapt when circumstances require capabilities you didn't know you possessed. The emergency in the Mariana Trench, which had begun as a potential disaster, had become the foundation for innovations in submarine training and operations that influenced the entire submarine force. And somewhere in the depths of the world's oceans, submarines operated by officers trained in Captain Blackwater's methods continued to conduct missions that officially never happened, gathering intelligence and maintaining the strategic balance that prevented conflict from escalating beyond diplomatic tensions. The cook who had hidden her true identity for 18 months had become the architect of a revolution in submarine warfare that proved the most valuable intelligence often comes from perspectives that no one expects to provide strategic insights. Because sometimes the person preparing your meals is also observing and analyzing everything about your operations. Sometimes the quiet crew member who attracts no attention is actually the most qualified officer aboard. And sometimes the most effective way to understand submarine operations is to observe them from the perspective of someone who appears to have no role in tactical decision-making. The 134 sailors who served aboard the USS Leviathan during Storm's assessment mission had unknowingly contributed to developments in submarine warfare that would influence naval operations for decades to come. Their performance under her covert observation had become the standard against which all submarine crews would be measured. But the deeper lesson of Storm Blackwater's story was that military effectiveness often comes from people and perspectives that remain hidden until circumstances require them to surface. The most dangerous assumption in submarine warfare, as in all military operations, is the assumption that you know who the most qualified person in the room actually is.